Good afternoon, everyone. Today is an incredibly special segment that I'm doing on Sin's Chat Corner. I was very blessed months and months ago to come across a fellow publicist who actually turned me on to Ben's story. Ben Lesser is probably, hands down, one of the most important interviews I will do in my lifetime. Not only is he a father and a grandfather, but he is also an author. He is the owner and founder of a nonprofit organization, and he is also a soon to be 96-year-old Holocaust survivor. Today, we're going to talk about his story. We're going to get into the foundation and what it means to spread a message of love and not hate. Today's segment is broken down into two shows, the first of which is Ben telling his story, and the second of which is us talking about ways in which you can not only learn more from the message that Ben spreads, but also how to help as well. So I appreciate you being here today, and without further ado, this is Ben Lesser. Okay. Today I'm here with Ben Lesser. Um, I just call him a living miracle. I'll leave it at that because hopefully the interview will get into absolutely everything else. So, Ben, I have a ton of questions for you, but I want to start off with your birthplace in Poland. I'd like you to tell me a bit about how much you remember about your homeland, and do you ever go back and visit?
Yes, we lived in Krakow, Poland. A beautiful building, a 3-story. It was an apartment house, and my father had two good businesses. He had a chocolate factory. He was the first one to manufacture chocolate-covered wafers, something like Kit Kat. And they had a wine and syrup factory. Very hard-working man, and he was a religious man. Our house was religious, but my mother's side of the family comes from Munkac, Hungary. It used to be Czechoslovakia, then it became Hungary in 1938. So every year my mother would take us kids in the summer to Munkac to be with her family. In the winter, we'd come back to Krakow, go to school, and so on. So it was a wonderful family, like we felt we had two homes.
Yes.
For us kids especially was great. And schooling, my schooling was limited, obviously, but it stopped at the 6th grade. But it's different than the 6th grade here in the United States.
Oh.
What's different is, for instance, I already spoke 6 languages, and I studied Polish history and all that, and Hebrew, biblical Hebrew. So that is in just one school. Then, of course, in regular school there was Polish, and I also studied German. My mother insisted that those kids should all know German, because German was the language of the elite in those days.
Ah, yes.
Anywhere you traveled in the world that we spoke German, you could get by. And I also spoke a little Czech and Hungarian and Yiddish. So actually it's 7 languages, but I was good in 6.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, prior to the start of your survival period, meaning before everything happened, could you offer us anything that you can remember about your childhood before the time that things started happening?
Oh, yes. As I said, I remember every summer going to Munkac. And Munkac was the main, my memory, mostly I remember is from Munkac.
Ah,
That was in my grandparents' house.
Oh,
Uh, my grandpa in Mugaj had a beautiful home. And he had a beautiful fruit garden. He had a flower garden, a berry garden, a fruit garden, and it was a big, big yard with fruit trees. And I remember every summer we would pick the pears, and there was a line, so we would pass the pear from person to person throughout the whole yard and garden, and I went up to the attic. They put it in tissue paper, each pear in the attic, and I guess that's where they're ripened. You know, uh, things like that I remember. But in Krakow, I don't remember going to school. I don't remember any friends, and nothing. It's like was wiped out from me. And my sister Lola was telling me I had a lot of friends, and I don't remember any. Just I had a stamp collection. She said, um, quite sizable, and I don't even remember that. I still love to collect stamps, but I don't remember what happened. It seems like all the years from before the war were just wiped out from me.
okay.
I don't remember it. I do remember one incident going with my father to a temple twice. That's all I remember.
Okay. Now, when you were age 13, an average child, that's not you per se, is out playing sports and hanging with their friends and doing things that children do. You, on the other hand, have a very different experience, obviously. So I want you to share with us as much of your story as you would like about what happened at age 13.
Yes, as I told you, we lived in a big 3-story apartment house on the ground floor. And one early in the morning, the whole building started to shake and rattle. So I ran to the window to see what happened, and I saw tanks were rolling down the street. That was I believe, in September or October, September of 1938.
Okay.
Yeah. Trucks were rolling down. I mean, tanks. Following the tanks, there were half tracks. And every few steps, a soldier would jump out of the half track, get on the sidewalk, and this is how they occupied the city. There was no fighting. Um, follow, Following them, there were the Wehrmacht with the shiny black boots and the goose steps. It was quite impressionable for a um, 10, almost 11-year-old.
Yeah.
Did, okay. But no one knew exactly what to expect. Right as they passed, my father called us kids into the dining room, set us down in chairs, and he said, "Okay, from this moment on, there are no more kids. You're all adults. You'll obey, you're gonna listen, no backtalk." And this is how we grew up overnight. On the fifth day of occupation, we found out what Nazi brutality was all about. A truck pulls up to the gate, 5 a.m. in the morning. and they bang on the gate full of soldiers. And the super came running out with his shirt tail hanging out. What's going on? All they wanted to know is where the Jewish people lived. And he was quick to oblige. He showed our apartment. And there was another couple who had two daughters, a little younger than I, and the mother gave birth to an infant little boy 2 months earlier. They came breaking into doors, pistol whipping us while we were in bed. In their hands they had sacks, open sacks, and they were yelling, "Throw in all your valuables, money, gold, silver, whatever they can find, throw it in." And they're beating up my father to open up the safe. While my father's trying to open the safe, we hear this terrible screaming from our neighbor's apartment. And my sister Lola and I went out through the kitchen door and into their kitchen door, and this is what we saw. This monster was holding the infant little boy, 2 month old little. They gave us a choice, the only time in history they gave us a choice. If you want to stay in Krakow, you have to go into the ghetto. They made a ghetto. I hope you know what a ghetto was.
Yes.
If you didn't want to go in the ghetto, the choice was you can go to a small community outside of Krakow, but you can't live in a big city, okay?
Okay.
So my father was preparing to go into the ghetto. In fact, his whole family, numbering over 200, they all went into the ghetto. And while my father is packing, a young man by the name of Michael Lieber comes over. He says, "Mr. Lesser, you know how I feel about your daughter, Lola. I love her. Someday I'd love to marry her. But do me a favor, come into the same community that my father and I are moving to. I'll make all the arrangements if you agree." Well, my father gave him a choice to go in the ghetto or to that Nyepolomice was called the community, Nyepolomice. He chose Nyepolomice. And they're packing in the wagon, and they have 2 sacks full of books, mostly Jewish literature. And that's when we found out that my father had 1,000 American dollars that he saved up for a rainy day. He took the money and pasted it between the pages in the book and put it in a sack full of other books. We had 2 sacks of books. They loaded it on the wagon, and we're now off to Boterniepolomice. My father has 6 of family members, bears numbering 6. We were 7, but my oldest sister, Goldie, was caught in Munkacs with her grandparents in Hungary, which was good. Hungary was a free country, so she was safe. For now, anyway. But my father has 6 people, and he's going, and all of a sudden, a bunch of Nazis helped, and 2 husky Nazis jump on the wagon. All they wanted to know if you have any Jewish literature, books. And they saw 2 sacks full of books. They picked them up and heaved it on the side of the road. They had a mountain full of books, You see, anyone who didn't go into the ghetto had to cross this road to leave Krakow. So they were waiting there and confiscating all the books that were never bound fire afterwards. My sister Lola spoke a beautiful German. So she walks up to him and says, "Look, my father is a writer. He wrote his autobiography. Let him keep this one book." He looked at her, maybe liked the way she spoke German. He says, "Okay, I'll give you 5 minutes to begin to find it." Well, the whole family started to climb on the mountain of books. All these books are leather-bound, brown or black. They look alike. After 5 minutes, he chased us away. No book. The father has 6 people on a wagon. We were 6. How is he going to feed us? He doesn't have a penny to his name. It's not like he can get a job. Jewish people were not allowed to be hired.
Yeah.
So when he came to Nepolomice, to this community, Michael rented a half of a farmhouse. The farmer lived on apple orchard farmer lived on one side, and the other side was our apartment. And between the two apartments, there was a baking oven. People used to bake their own breads in those days. My future brother-in-law, Michael, saw what was happening. He found out my father has no money. He brought my father 100 pounds of flour, figuring he'll be able to bake bread to feed the family. When my father saw the flour, his face lit up. Instead of baking bread, he started to bake pretzels. Why pretzels? All you need for pretzels is flour, water, and salt. Those ingredients he had. Then he took the pretzels to the neighboring bars, taverns, and offered it for sale. It was a novelty. They were buying these pretzels. Now my father became a little baker in that community. After pretzels, there was rolled cakes, cookies, all kind of delicacies. And I was 12 years old. I remember baking with him. In fact, one of the things I remember is baking Mandelbrot. You know, those boxes were in business. Anyway, this went on for about a year. And Lola Manette marries Michaels. There was a big crowd of friends and the relatives that came to the wedding.
Okay.
And I'll show you a picture later. I don't have the thing. Out of all these people, only 3 of us survived. Michael, Lola, and I. The rest were all killed. Anyway, they moved out, Michael and Lola, into a duplex. One side of the duplex lived the owner, who happened to be the mayor of Nepolomice. And one day he comes home, he says, "Michael, Lola, save yourselves. I heard the rumor there's going to be a raid against the Jewish people tonight or tomorrow night." When Michael heard that, he went out and he hired the wagon with the driver, and we snuck out in the middle of the night. And the only place we can go was the closest city, which was called Bochnia. Bochnia had a ghetto, so that meant we had to go inside the ghetto. Well, Bochnia ghetto had a very bad reputation. What happened? Every so often, 2 or 3 dump trucks would come into the ghetto, and the Nazis would go from house to house, pull out the children from their beds, and throw them into these dump trucks. You can imagine the parents were screaming for the children are screaming for the parents. And as they filled up the 2 or 3 dump trucks, they pulled out of the ghetto with the kids. The parents are running behind, screaming for their children. But these cultured people had machine guns at the end of each truck, and they mowed down the parents running behind the truck. That resonated throughout Europe. Stay away from Bochnia Ghetto. But we had no choice. And as it turned out, it's a good thing we left, because Neapolomice did have a raid, and they were going from building to building and pulled out all the Jewish people, threw them into trucks, took them to the forest. The man was given shovels. They dug a ditch, and then everyone was shot. How do we know about Neapolomice people being taken to the forest? Well, Lola and I are the only survivors from the family. After the war, we went back to Neapolomice to find out what happened. And the farmers were telling us, as they were going to the forest early in the morning to pick mushrooms and berries to sell in the market, they saw those trucks pull in, and they were hiding behind trees. And they saw everything. They said the ground was moving 3 days after. They didn't care if they killed you or not, they buried you alive. So it's good that we went to Bochnia. And in Bochnia, the driver unloads us in the middle of the street. We were sitting there with our belongings sitting there, when suddenly Michael sees a school buddy who he went to school with, and he's wearing a policeman's uniform. They had no weapons. All they had is a baton, those policemen. Their job was to keep order inside the ghetto. His name was Farber. Farber says, Michael, Lola, what are you doing here? Michael tells him the story about Neapolomice. He says, don't worry, I'll find you a place to live. He takes Michael and Lola and his parents someplace, I don't know where. And he takes my father, my mother, myself, my little brother to another place. There were just one big room. The room was about this size, but there were 8 other people. So now we were 12. No beds. All they had is straw on the ground, blankets on top of the straw, blankets hanging on the ceiling separating each family. Everyone had to work inside the ghetto. If you didn't work, you didn't receive any rations. You would die. My job was I was putting on buttons on uniforms. You know, yes, they're soldiers' uniforms. It was easy work. It was 13 hours a day, very little sleep and very little food. This went on for a long time. One day, Farber, that friendly Jewish policeman, goes over to Michael and Lola and tells them to hide. He heard the rumor there's going to be a raid inside the ghetto tonight or tomorrow. Well, that's when Michael and Lola went to their hiding place, which was a doghouse. You heard right, a doghouse. You lifted up the floor of the doghouse. There was a step ladder, and there was room for 7 people, and provisions and bread and everything in there.
Okay.
I'll come back to their doghouse in a little later. But ever since those trucks would come in, pull out the children from their beds, every apartment in Bochnia Ghetto and every house had a hiding place. They called it a bunker. Bunker. That's when we found out our hiding place was this ornate piece of furniture where you hang your coats and jackets. You push the clothing apart. There was a hole in the wall, and the back panel would slide apart, and the 12 of us could crawl through the hole, get on the other side, stand between 2 buildings, and the last person would close the door behind him, put the closing back in place, close the panel back, and we stood there all night long hearing shootings, dogs barking, screaming. We heard our dogs, those dogs are tearing apart our neighbors. This went on all night. I can't tell you what kind of miracle it was that they didn't find us. They had dogs sniffing around and looking for people. And when we did come out, we'd found the doors were open, the closing was pushed apart. We were that lucky with this slight panel hiding 12 people. In the morning we came out, and when we walked outside, we couldn't believe what our eyes were seeing. Our neighbors torn apart, laying in the snow, pieces. We saw a mother with an infant torn apart to pieces. People going around the push carts and picking up these bodies and pieces of bodies, putting them on the push cart, and then taking these push carts to the ghetto square and piling them up as high as they could. These cultured people came with gasoline cans, poured gasoline over these bodies, half dead bodies. Not everybody was dead. And they started a human bonfire in Bochnia Ghetto Square. You can't imagine the screams the ashes, the smell. It was like hell on earth. And we went to the doghouse where Michael and Lola were supposed to be hiding with his parents. And this is what we saw. I'll tell you in a minute. And they're telling us the story, what happened. As they were about to go into the doghouse, another Jewish policeman by the name of Morris Schiller walks up to them and he says, Michael, Lola, I know about your hiding place in the doghouse. Unless you take my mother and my sister along, I'll tell the authorities. There was only room for 7. Now they were 9. So Michael and Lola walked away to allow the other 7 to go in. Of course, the mother was running after him. No, no, you go down in the doghouse. We lived our lives. You were newlyweds. They wouldn't hear of it. They walked away. As they're walking, they see Morris, they see Farber, the friendly policeman. He says, Michael, Lola, aren't you hiding someplace? So he tells him this story about Morris Schiller. He says, don't worry, where my sister and her 2 children are hiding, there's room for you. Follow me. And they follow him to a leather factory, a tannery, and above the tannery there was a water tank. He says, my sister and her 2 children are inside the water tank. There's a step ladder in the back, and when you're on top, there is a rope. You can lower yourself into the tank. In the morning, when you hear a certain knock, that's a signal you can come out that caused you scare. Michael Lola is telling the story. Now they're lowering themselves into the water tank. They saw his sister is knee deep in water. The little girl waist high in water. The mother is holding an infant little boy, asleep, but they're shaking, shivering with ice cold water. They Michael picked up the little girl. Lola picked up the infant little boy from the mother, and all 4 of them were standing there and shivering all night long. Actually, there were 5 of them in there. Towards morning, they heard that friendly knock. That meant the coast is clear. They pulled themselves out, and after they came down and they got some circulation back into their lives, the first thing they wanted to know is what happened at the doghouse with his parents. And they came to the doghouse. They saw everybody's laying in the snow with a bullet in their head. Everybody's dead. Lola started to scream. Michael stopped her. They may still hear you. The match still be burning, Bobby. And with a crushed cry, they knew what they had to do. They went out and they found a rickety wheelbarrow. They put the family in the wheelbarrow and they took him to the cemetery up the hill. Michael found a shovel, and Lola, with her bare hands frozen around it, they were able to dig out a hole, put the family in. They put the family in, and Morris Schiller walks up. He says it wasn't my fault. It wasn't his fault because his own mother and his own sister were killed too.
Yes.
However, he says, that grave that you just put your family in, I want it for my mother and my sister. You're going to have to take him out. Lola started to cry, and Michael said, look, he's got the power over us. And they pulled the family back on the real world, took him to a different spell, and they started all over again. While this is going on, there's a Jeep coming up the hill, and it stops right at the cemetery gate. Two husky soldiers jump out of the Jeep. They come to the cemetery, yelling, Morris Schiller, Morris Schiller. He says, yeah, well, here I am. He walks up to them. They pull out the revolver and they shot him. They shot him dead. That's what they did to people who have seen too much. They didn't want to leave any witnesses. And after they left, Michael and Lola went down the hill, holding each other, crying. And they came down the hill. They saw people going around in pushcarts and loudspeakers and yelling. Anyone after the ghetto had to go register in the Judenrat and the Jewish police station. If you didn't register, you won't get any rations, so you starve. So the story begins. Michael and Lola went down there. My father, mother, I, my brother be up and down, and his family. We're standing in line. Lola was first one in line, and she walks up to that window. The other side of the window was an assessment, asking questions. In a chair sitting near the assessment was the head of the Gestapo from Bosnia. Not just the ghetto, all Bosnia. His name was Schonbrook. Schonbrook. And he's listening to what's going on. And they asked Lola where she lives, and they asked her age when she was born. She gives that. And then they asked her where were you born. She said in Munkac. She was born in Munkac. Munkac, where's that? Well, now it's Hungary. It used to be Czechoslovakia. Anyway, and they asked Lola, where were you born? She says, in Munkac. Where is Munkac? It's now Hungary. It used to be Czechoslovakia. Schonbrook, who is sitting in a chair there, says, stop everything. I want this young lady in my office tomorrow at 9 a.m. When Lola heard that, she started to cry, and she walked away from the window. And of course, the whole family walked away with her. We went to the house, to the apartment, and she was crying. Oh, why would the head of Gestapo ask to come to his office? It was obvious, okay?
Mm-hmm.
In the morning, about 8 a.m., two Jewish policemen walk over. Barber was one of them. Says, "Lo, it's time to go." And they walked out. And the Folk family and friends were all who heard that. And friends were all coming, following Lola. And Lola had to cross the gate outside the ghetto. So we can only go up to the gate. And among us, there was a friend who was a rabbi. The Baba rabbi was very well known. But then he was just in regular clothes, clean shaven, was working in the Judenrat. He was a friend of ours, and he comes there, and Lola goes out of the gate, and my father yells to her something in Hebrew, which means it's better to die than to give in to those Nazis. And she leaves with the two policemen, and she goes to the Gestapo headquarters, who happened to be a Jewish home at one time. Beautiful place. And they come in, they see a lot of secretaries with typewriters. And at the end of the room, there is a desk. Behind the desk, Schönbrück. And when he sees Lola come in, he stands up behind the desk, which was unusual. And when she comes close, he pulls up a chair for her to sit down. Well, that was a completely unusual. And he saw she's shaking and crying. He says, "Calm down. No one's gonna hurt you here. Take it easy. Sit down." And she looks at him. It was very unusual. And he says to her, "Were you really born in Munkaj?" She says again, which is yes. He started questioning her about movie stars, Hungarian movie stars, about food, goulash, and all that. But she knew everything where she was born. So, we ordered star flour. He goes to the star and he pulls a dogger. He says, "You're one lucky young woman." She looks at him. "You see, Munkaj is in Hungary. Hungary is an ally of Germany. We have no quarrel with Hungary. Therefore, we have no jurisdiction over you. You're a Hungarian citizen. You don't have to wear this. You don't even have to live in the ghetto." Oh, when she heard it, she started to cry for happiness. And he also asked, "What about the rest of the family?" She says, "Everybody now was born in Munkach," which wasn't true. I was ready.
Yes.
My father, only my mother and hers were born in Munkach. So he orders his secretaries to take down our names from the whole family, type out papers. He said, "We are exempt from bearing the Star of David. We don't have to live in the ghetto. and she couldn't believe what he's saying. And she thanked him, and she even kissed his hand. Very unusual. And she walked out. She's now coming back to the ghetto, and we were all waiting there for her, okay? And she comes back with a smile on her face, and her clothes are not tattered. Everything seems to be in order. And she comes in the ghetto, and she tells the story. We're starved, David. We don't have to live here. Well, there was a rabbi there, a friend of ours. He picks her up and he dances with Lola. He says, Lolo, you're a modern day Queen Esther. I don't know if you know what
I do.
Esther is.
Yeah.
Okay. So she says, what do you mean? He saw some things that no one else saw. He says, look, I work in the Uniroute and I have clean typing papers. I know someone who has a rubber ball, so we can use that ball to duplicate the stamp from Schönbrück.
Oh.
All we need now is someone to support your signature.
Yes.
And my older brother, Moishi, he volunteered for that. He was a good forger. And we started to work on people, and they heard that, everybody wanted to get out of the ghetto. Lola. Anyway, they were about the whole family, our family, of course, went out of the ghetto, and we took out 55 other people with us. And meanwhile, my brother is being jailed. Somehow or another, they found out. So they put my brother in a concentration camp. Schönbrück was executed because they found out what he did. That story with Hungarian, not Hungarian, with the Nazis, it makes no difference. You're Jewish. So now we're outside the ghetto,